My wife chose her kin over me after their cold betrayal ultimatum, us or him. I said no to their crypto scam, so I truly took her at her word. That single sentence, I choose them, spoken by my wife, Eleanor, killed my marriage faster than any argument ever could. It wasn't just a choice, it was a detonation. And honestly, I wasn't even shocked in the way you might think. What I felt was a profound sense of doneness. It was like the final, brutal move in a twisted game they'd been playing behind my back for weeks. Our living room, usually a place of quiet comfort, had transformed into a battleground that night, the air thick with unspoken tension, a chilling prelude to the ambush I hadn't seen coming. Later, I found out it was exactly that, a whole text thread, a coordinated attack, all about my money. But right then, all I saw was Eleanor, my wife of 4 years, choosing her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, and her siblings, Ethan and Chloe, over our marriage. Like it meant absolutely nothing. I'm 35, and before this whole mess exploded, I genuinely thought Eleanor and I had one of those rare, stable, low-drama marriages everyone secretly envies. We had our routines, our shared hobbies, our own friends who got along. And what I believed were rock-solid agreements about money and boundaries. From day one, we decided to keep our finances separate. We both worked, we both brought our own savings and debts into the marriage. For me, that meant $85,000 I'd painstakingly saved, dime by dime, through years of overtime, tiny apartments, and saying a hard no to anything I couldn't truly afford. That money wasn't just savings, it was my future, a down payment for a house, or the seed money for a small business. Eleanor knew about it, broadly, and we'd always agreed it was premarital, my money. For the first few years? Non-issue. We split rent fairly, paid bills, and if one of us was a little short, the other covered it without a fuss. It was normal. Stable. Then, Ethan, Eleanor's brother, stumbled into crypto. Got lucky on one of his first trades, turning a few thousand into about 15 grand during a bull run. Suddenly, the guy who bounced between jobs became the family's resident finance guru. He'd send everyone articles he barely understood, talking like he'd cracked some secret code to wealth. At first, it was just annoying background noise at family dinners. But then, he announced his grand idea, a family investment pool. Everyone puts in money, he manages it in crypto, and they all grow rich together. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes bought in. Chloe threw money in. A couple of cousins joined. And just like that, Ethan's hobby became a full-blown family project. I said no. Immediately. Politely, but firmly. I told Ethan I wasn't interested in gambling with money I couldn't afford to lose. That I preferred boring, steady investments over chasing quick wins. He just brushed me off, kept pushing. What I didn't know then, what truly twists my gut now, is that Eleanor had told them the exact amount I had saved. Not he has some savings, but he has $85,000. That number, that specific figure, transformed me from a family member with boundaries into a walking, talking ATM they just hadn't convinced yet. The pressure started subtle. Little jokes about me being afraid of success. Comments about real men taking risks. Small, cutting digs from Ethan and Chloe about me being too cautious. I brushed it off, reiterated my no, and foolishly assumed Eleanor, my wife, had my back. Just like I would have had hers. I was so wrong. The night everything exploded, Eleanor told me her family wanted to come over to talk about something important. I figured it was standard family stuff, health, holidays, something benign. Instead, I walked into my own apartment and found Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, Ethan, and Chloe all sitting in the living room. It was staged. Like I'd walked into a meeting I hadn't agreed to attend. Ethan launched into a full-blown presentation, slides and everything, about how well the family pool was doing. How now was the perfect time for me to do the right thing and put in a big chunk so they could scale. I, again, calmly said I wasn't interested. That my savings were for a house or a business, not speculative gambling. Ethan smirked. Said something condescending like, "Man, you really don't get it." but I kept my voice steady. Then, Mrs. Hayes started crying. Not just tearing up, full-on, racking sobs about how real husbands share everything with their wives and how I was keeping Eleanor from her family's future. Mr. Hayes jumped in, asking if I even trusted Eleanor. If I saw myself as part of their family or just some outsider renting space in her life. And the whole time, Eleanor sat there. On our couch. Silent. Staring at the floor. Not once, not a single time, telling them to back off. Not saying, hey, this isn't okay. That silence. That indifference. It hurt more than anything they said. I tried to hold it together. I explained, one last time, that my decision wasn't about trust or love. It was about risk, about planning, about being uncomfortable putting my entire safety net into something I didn't believe in. Ethan called me a coward. Chloe said I was holding Eleanor back from a better life. Mrs. Hayes cried louder. Mr. Hayes's face hardened. Then, he turned to Eleanor. And he said the line that detonated everything, make him choose. Us or him. The room went dead quiet. Eleanor looked at me. Then at them. Then back at me. There was this agonizing, suspended moment where I honestly thought she'd finally speak up for us. For our marriage. Or at least say this had gone too far. Instead, she took a slow, deliberate breath. And she said, I choose them. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. No apology. No hesitation after that breath. No, I'm sorry. Just a clear, cold choice in her eyes. The silence that followed was heavier, more suffocating than any argument had been. Her family looked almost surprised she'd actually said it out loud. I stood up. Looked at her. And I just said, understood. That was it. No yelling. No big speech. Just a line. And a decision. They all started talking at once, trying to justify, to explain, to spin it. But I was already gone. I walked into our bedroom, closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed. The shock settled in, but quickly gave way to something else, not a desire to react emotionally, but to act decisively. I pulled out my phone, started looking up divorce attorneys. I found one with incredible reviews, offering after-hours consultations. I sent a short email, summarizing the raw events. 20 minutes later, a reply, a time slot for that very night. While Eleanor and her family were still in the living room, talking in hushed tones, I climbed out the bedroom window, easy, first floor. Got in my car, drove to a coffee shop parking lot, and called Mr. Davies, my lawyer. I told him everything. The separate finances, the premarital savings, the coordinated pressure, the ultimatum, her choice. He listened, asked a few pointed questions, then laid it out. No kids, separate finances, clear division of property? This could be straightforward, if I moved quickly and didn't waver. He emailed the retainer agreement right then. I signed it on my phone, in that car, under the glow of the parking lot lights. Told him to start first thing Monday morning. When I got back home later that night, her family was gone. Eleanor was in bed, asleep. Or pretending to be. I didn't wake her. I packed a bag, grabbed my important documents, and left before sunrise. Checked into a cheap hotel. Monday morning, I signed the official paperwork. By evening, Eleanor was listed as the respondent in a divorce filing she didn't even know existed yet. Over the next 2 days, while she was at work, I hired movers. Cleared out everything that was undeniably mine. My furniture, my electronics, my clothes, my personal items. We'd always kept most big purchases separate, so drawing the line wasn't hard. I left her furniture, her decor, her kitchen stuff, anything that was hers, or that we'd clearly bought for her. When the movers finished, the place looked like a stripped-down skeleton of our life. And that felt fitting. On the kitchen counter, I left the apartment keys. And a note. Simple. My lawyer's contact info. And one single line, as you chose, so shall it be. Then I walked out. And I didn't look back. I moved into a small studio across town, updated my address, changed my banking info, and told HR at work I was going through a divorce, no personal calls or visitors without my permission. I blocked Eleanor and every single member of her family on my phone and social media before she even saw the empty apartment. A couple of days later, Mr. Davies emailed. She'd been served. She was in shock, asking if it was real or some kind of stunt. It wasn't a stunt. It was me finally believing what she'd told me when she said, "I choose them." And acting like she actually meant it. See, the thing about Eleanor? She genuinely thought I was bluffing. I didn't know that at first, but during the legal process, I saw messages. Messages where she told Ethan and Chloe things like, "He'll cool off in a few days." This is just his way of making a point. Like I was some teenager slamming doors, not a grown man ending a marriage. That first night, she'd apparently called my phone over and over, not understanding that blocked means blocked. And when that didn't work, she started sending long texts I never even saw. Her family was just as sure I'd come crawling back. Ethan apparently told everyone I'd realize how dumb I was being and come around once I'd gotten it out of my system. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my new apartment, eating takeout on a folding chair, going over documents with Mr. Davies, and feeling weirdly calm. The divorce filing wasn't a heat-of-the-moment reaction. It was the only logical conclusion once she made it clear I wasn't her first choice. Or even close. At our second meeting, Mr. Davies looked at me, a little confused, and said, "Most people are a lot more conflicted at this stage. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" I told him, I've never been more sure of anything. The moment she chose her family in that living room? That was the moment our marriage ended. Everything else was just paperwork. He nodded. Asked if I wanted to go after fault-based grounds, or try to punish her financially. I said, no. I don't want revenge. I want distance. A clean break. Separate property stays separate, no alimony since we both work, split the apartment deposit fairly, and move on. He said with that approach, assuming she didn't fight the obvious, we could be done in a few months. The first real sign that Eleanor finally realized I wasn't bluffing came about 5 days after I moved out. Security at my job called. Someone was in the lobby asking for me. It was her. She looked wrecked, like she hadn't slept in days. Demanded to know what I thought I was doing. I kept a good couple of steps between us, calmly telling her that if she had questions, she needed to contact my lawyer. She actually laughed. "You can't seriously be divorcing me over money?" And that was the one time I let myself say exactly what I felt. I told her, "I'm divorcing you because when your family told you to choose between them and your husband, you chose them. And I'm just respecting your decision." Her face went from angry to ghost white in a second. She started talking fast, saying I took it out of context, that she'd been under pressure, that she didn't really mean it like that. I reminded her she'd had weeks to stand up for our marriage while her family ramped up the pressure. That she'd sat silently during the ambush. And that when it mattered most, she sided with them. She reached out, like she wanted to grab my arm. I stepped back. Told her again this conversation was over, and any further communication needed to go through Mr. Davies. Then I walked back towards security. They escorted her out when she tried to follow me. I filed a report with HR, not to get her in trouble, but to make sure there was a paper trail if things escalated. That same evening, Mr. Davies called. His tone was different, more serious. "I need you in my office tomorrow. There's something you need to see." I spent the whole night wondering what else could possibly be waiting. The next morning, I sat in his office. He opened a folder on his computer, showing me a series of screenshots. Messages. Texts. Between Eleanor and her family. From weeks before the ambush. What I thought had been an emotional blow-up? It was a planned operation. Choreography. Ethan had written, "Once he sees everyone united, he'll cave." Eleanor had responded, "I told them it's 85K. That should be enough to get started." Seeing my savings reduced to a number in a group chat, like I was some unwilling investor, stung in a way I wasn't ready for. Mrs. Hayes had sent long messages about how to guilt-trip me, talking about real husbands and family unity. And Eleanor? She added suggestions like, if we make it emotional, he'll feel too bad to say no. They discussed where everyone should sit, who should talk first, how to build pressure so I'd feel cornered. But the message that hit the hardest? One from Eleanor to Chloe, 2 days before everything blew up. It said, if he really won't do it, I might have to choose them to make him understand we're serious, but he'll come around after. That single line. It told me everything. To her, those words, I choose them, were just a move. A negotiation tactic. A scare tactic. She never, ever believed I'd take them at face value. Mr. Davies watched my reaction, asked if I was okay. I didn't know how to answer. It felt like my brain had to rewrite the entire last month with this new information. He said, "This is coordinated pressure. It's basically a plan to coerce you into handing over your assets. This gives you a very strong position if this goes to court." I asked how he even had these messages. He reminded me of the tablet. The one we kept at home. The one I took without thinking because I bought it. Eleanor had been lazy with her settings. Her messages were still syncing there through our shared cloud. Legally? Simple. Device was mine, data accessible. And what it showed wasn't ambiguous. I scrolled through weeks of them talking about me like a problem to be solved. And somewhere around the 10th screenshot, any leftover sadness I had hardened into something cold. Very, very cold. Mr. Davies said we could absolutely crush her in court, fault-based grow. Maybe even claims about attempted financial coercion. I thought about it. And still said no. I didn't want to destroy her. I just wanted to be done. The only thing I asked was that we use enough of these messages to make it clear we weren't bluffing. So she and her lawyer understood I wasn't someone they could push around. He pulled a few key screenshots, sent them to her attorney with a professional summary. And waited. It didn't take long. Within hours, her lawyer was suddenly much more cooperative, talking about how his client wanted to resolve things quickly and quietly. Over the next couple of weeks, we worked out a settlement that looked almost exactly like what I'd asked for on day one. She kept her things. I kept mine. We split the apartment deposit. And she signed off on having zero claim to my premarital savings or any assets in my name. No alimony, no support. Just 2 adults, cutting the cord. There was even a confidentiality clause, basically, neither of us could publicly trash the other with divorce details. I signed it as soon as it hit my inbox. She sat on it for a few days, probably hoping I'd blink. Then, finally, she signed too. All that was left was the waiting period and the court date. I honestly thought that would be the moment her family backed off. They'd lost the money play. They'd lost the control. What I underestimated was how badly some people take it when their manipulation doesn't work. Ethan started posting vague things on social media about people who choose money over family and fake husbands. Mrs. Hayes called my mom, crying about how I'd abandoned poor Eleanor over a small disagreement about investments. My dad called me, asked what was going on. I gave him the short version. Her family tried to pressure me into dumping my savings into Ethan's crypto scheme. Eleanor chose them over me. I filed for divorce. He was quiet for a second, then said, "Good. You don't need people like that in your life." That was the affirmation I didn't know I needed. But the family didn't stop. I started getting emails from throwaway accounts, calling me selfish, saying I'd regret this, saying real men take care of family. A LinkedIn message from a fake name, but repeating phrases I'd heard Ethan use. Even a handwritten letter at my new address, full of guilt and insults. I forwarded everything to Mr. Davies. Kept blocking. Stayed completely silent. Eventually, the harassment turned more direct. And that's when it stopped being just annoying and started feeling dangerous. Mr. Davies called one morning, his tone immediately putting me on edge. Security at my office had reported that Mr. Hayes, Eleanor's father, had been sitting in his car in the parking lot for hours, waiting for me. When I arrived, he apparently got out, tried to approach my car before I even stepped out. I hadn't noticed, too focused on my phone, but security did. They told him to leave. He argued. They called the police. Nothing violent happened, but it was enough. Mr. Davies used that incident, combined with the messages and unwanted contact, to get a restraining order. Within days, there was a court order. Eleanor's family had to stay away from me, my home, my workplace. I thought that would finally scare them into stopping. Instead, they shifted to petty tactics. A noise complaint about my apartment, even though my neighbors knew I was quiet. My bank locked my account temporarily after multiple failed login attempts from unknown locations. My employer got a random negative review online, naming me specifically as unprofessional. My boss brought it up, then tossed it aside when I explained what was happening. None of it ruined my life, but all of it was clearly meant to rattle me. To remind me they weren't happy I'd walked away without giving them what they wanted. Every new incident, I sent it to Mr. Davies. He documented everything, and had another talk with their side, making it clear that if this continued, there'd be more legal consequences. Then, the day of the final divorce hearing arrived. I won't pretend I wasn't nervous walking into that courthouse. I hadn't seen Eleanor in person since the scene at my job. She was already there when I walked in, sitting with her lawyer. She looked smaller somehow. Tired. Pale. Eyes on the floor. She didn't look at me. I didn't try to get her attention. The hearing itself was almost anticlimactic. The judge looked through our agreement, asked a few standard questions to make sure we both understood, and then asked, "Do you both agree this is fair, and you want this divorce finalized?" We both said yes. He signed the decree. Just like that, for years of marriage were over in under half an hour. Walking out of that building, I felt lighter than I had in months. The stress, the low-level anger, the constant second-guessing, it all just lifted. Mr. Davies shook my hand, said, "Congratulations, you're free." It sounded cheesy, but he was right. That night, I went to a decent restaurant alone, ordered a good meal, raised a glass of wine to no one in particular, and let myself enjoy the silence. I thought that was the end of the story. Life, however, had other plans. About 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Mr. Davies called again. This time, he sounded almost amused. He told me the crypto platform Eleanor's family had poured their money into had been hit with a federal investigation. Accounts frozen, withdrawals halted. It looked like most investors were going to lose a huge portion of what they'd put in. From what he'd heard, her family had around $50,000 tied up in that platform. Gone. Or as good as gone. "I know you're not the vindictive type," he said, "but you have to admit the irony here." And yeah, I did. If I had caved that night in my living room, if I'd let their pressure work, that $85,000 of my money would have gone into the exact same black hole. Instead, it was still sitting safely in my boring, normal accounts. Untouched. By their disaster. After the news about the platform broke, I started seeing blocked call notifications from numbers I recognized. Eleanor. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes. Ethan. All trying to reach me. Mr. Davies later told me her lawyer had reached out with a question that almost made him laugh. Would I consider helping them financially, now that things had gone so badly with the investment? The answer, of course, was a simple, resounding no. I didn't owe them a bailout from a fire they set themselves. Through a mutual acquaintance, I later heard how things fell apart in their house. Mr. Hayes and Ethan turned on each other, each blaming the other for losing the family's future. Mrs. Hayes was furious about the chunk of retirement savings that had evaporated. Chloe was mad at everyone. And in the middle of that storm was Eleanor. The person who'd once had a husband and a stable life, but chose to gamble all of it on loyalty to the wrong people. The acquaintance asked if I felt bad for her. I told them the truth. I felt nothing. Not hatred, not joy. Just distance. She'd made her choices as an adult. The consequences were hers. Not mine. About 3 months after the divorce was finalized, a letter showed up at my new place, forwarded from my old address. 5 pages, handwritten. The return name was hers. I almost tossed tea without opening it, but curiosity won. It was exactly what you'd expect. Apologies. Claimed she'd finally seen how toxic her family was. Statements that losing the marriage was the worst thing that had ever happened to her. Regret for saying, I choose them. A plea to talk. Maybe start over. I read it once, all the way through. Then again, more slowly. There were parts that felt honest. And parts that felt like someone trying to rewrite history to make themselves look less cruel and more confused. But none of it changed the simple, central fact. When it mattered, she chose. And I believed her. I folded the pages, walked over to my paper shredder, and fed the letter in until it was just strips. No dramatic gesture. No anger. Just a quiet decision to keep her in my past. Where she belonged. Life after all of this turned out better than I expected. I got a promotion at work, started taking better care of my health, picked up hobbies I'd dropped. Eventually, I adopted a rescue dog that became my little shadow. My apartment wasn't big or fancy, but it was peaceful. There was no yelling. No manipulation. No one trying to calculate how to get to my bank account. My $85,000 stayed exactly where it had been through this whole mess. Quietly growing. Instead of disappearing into someone else's vision. Every now and then, someone who knows the story asks if I regret how decisively I walked away. If I ever wonder if I should have given her another chance, or tried counseling, or waited for her to come around. The answer is no. When someone looks at you in the middle of a crisis and says, I choose them, believe them. When they show you that your place in their life is negotiable, treat that as a final answer. Not a starting point for debate. Eleanor chose her family over me. I said, understood. Everything that followed, the divorce, the fallout, the crypto collapse, the letter, was just the universe running the math on that moment. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need some big dramatic showdown. All I needed to do was quietly remove myself from the equation. And let their choices catch up with them. And they did. What do you all think about this? Was I too harsh? Or was I completely justified in taking her at her word? Let me know in the comments below. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. And if you found this story compelling, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life narratives.